Good morning, Central. It is a good morning to start off together here, a good way to start the day in God's Word. Take a second, say hi to one another just like we do each morning, see who is here, and go ahead and talk during class. That is permitted as we are together here and look at what God has to say about getting this day off to a good day. For a moment, I want you just to yourself this morning to think about the time or a time in your life that was emotionally the hardest thing that you've ever endured. Okay? The hardest thing you had to go through emotionally. Do you have that in mind? How did you make it through? After all, you're here watching this right now. You did make it through, but were you scarred by it? Did you run? When you look back, does it make you shudder? Most every one of us could point to at least some time like that in life. Yesterday we were talking about the extreme difficulty of what Jesus faced in the Garden of Gethsemane. So much was pressing in on him at that time, but by the time he's leaving there, arrested, it's impossible to miss the strength and the resolve of Jesus as he begins his walk to be tortured to death. As a huge crowd of soldiers comes to arrest him, Jesus steps forward and asks, "Whom do you seek?" When they say Jesus of Nazareth, he says, "I am he." And they all fall back, tripping over themselves. Peter decides it's time to solve the situation with a sword, and Jesus tells him to stop it. That Jesus must drink the cup the Father has for him to drink. And according to Jesus, at any given moment, he could call on the Father, and more than 12 legions of angels, that's some number over 72,000, would be at his disposal to rescue him. But he doesn't, because he's on a mission to make it to the cross. It's Jesus' hardest time on earth, and he faces it with the strongest resolve. I've often referred back to 2 Corinthians 10:3 and following as a reminder that the battle that we're in is a war of ideas and convictions, that it's going to be won or lost up there before you ever live it out. And Gethsemane is proof of that, because once it's settled in his mind, Jesus' actions leave no doubt about who already won. Man, I want that. I want to be able to face life's toughest times with that kind of power and resolve. So we're going to go back to the garden again this morning to see some of the helps that Jesus tapped into that we have as well to help us at real crisis times. First of all, Jesus prayed. It wasn't the first time at all. That was his regular practice. And even before Gethsemane, in John 17, we read the longest recorded prayer of Jesus. When he arrives at the garden, Jesus tells the disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And then he takes along Peter, James, and John, and he tells them, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." He goes away from them. He falls to the ground. He prays 3 times. He prays. I'll just remind you this morning that if you're facing a problem, you need to face it in prayer. If you're let down or beat up, or if you're tempted, you need to take your problem to the Father. He's big enough, he can fix it. And when you do that, that's following the example of Jesus to make it through. Jesus also turned to fellowship. Isn't it interesting that for all the times they disappointed him, for all of the frustration that Jesus dealt with as he worked to prepare these men who would become his apostles, when it came down to the end, what did Jesus do? He surrounded himself with his closest friends, those men. I've been around some people at the time of their death, and I have yet to hear someone say to all of his or her family members, "Hey, why don't you all just leave the room or go? I want to be alone." No, they usually ask their loved ones not to leave. They want them nearby during that time. Too often in the church, when people are facing hard times, they tend to drift off by themselves. And you know, Satan uses that. It is exactly the opposite of what we need. Having fellowship means we have things in common. It means that when one part of the body is facing a crisis, the other parts of the body share. They have that in common. We all need that fellowship of believers. We especially need it when we're facing troubling times. I think the last year has really driven home that point. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. God has given us each other as a help. One other thing that Jesus did is he made himself completely resigned to God's plan. While he's on earth, Jesus says he does only what the Father wants him to do. And whatever the specific challenge Jesus was struggling with in the garden, whatever the temptation was in the fellowship of his friends as he prayed, it lasted about one sentence. No sooner had Jesus said, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me," than he also said, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." You see, Jesus resigned, not from being Messiah, but to the Father's will. Not my will. That would be a wonderful short prayer to repeat at key times today and through life. How many times have you been unable to come up with an answer to a problem, a reason for what has happened? Life gets out of control. You really can't make sense of it. What can you do? You can resign. Not resign your job or your marriage or from being president of the club, but resign your will to God's will. Trust that God will keep his word. Will he really work all things together for good to them who love him? Will the testing of your faith really make you a more complete person? Is God really showing that he loves you as his child when he allows you to endure discipline? Is it true that our present sufferings are not worthy to be compared to the glory that will be revealed to us? Go ahead. Give up. Just make sure that what you're giving up is your plans with your limited knowledge, your limited understanding of life. Resign to God's plan. Pray that prayer. Not my will. See how much help you'll have from the Father. Not my will. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.